married or in a relationship with infertility, here are some things that could save you a lot of heartache, a lot of time, and ways to make this successful without your marriage falling apart. Stay tuned. Okay, so we've discovered we have infertility, but we're still in a marriage or relationship that we still want to work. No relationship, no marriage is rainbows and butterflies on a normal day or in a normal lifetime, but when you add infertility, we can be in some rough days. We can pretty much say we got some rough days ahead. It can really test a marriage because infertility can be one of the toughest things any couple goes through. Doesn't matter if you're married or you're just boyfriend girlfriend. Doesn't matter if you are a same-sex couple. When we're talking about infertility, and it doesn't matter what you are, who you are, what color you are. It doesn't matter. All that matters is you keeping your relationship so you can get to the finish line of your journey. It can impact a marriage because if you have been trying for that year, that 6 months, it can really put a strain on your relationship when you decide to seek help, because you are struggling. You don't want to bring somebody else into it. So you guys might be like, no, let's wait a little while longer. How about we do this now? We've been waiting long enough. And it can put kind of a strain on it. The second one that's usually pretty hard is, when do you tell your friends and family? This is one of the big things that I struggled with. I don't want people knowing what's happening in my bed. I don't want people to know that we're struggling. So I really didn't feel comfortable telling our friends and family. Outside of my mother, I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell them we're struggling. But when it gets down to going to family functions, as we enter to this fall season, and you go to functions and everybody's like, okay, you guys have been married for years now, when are you going to have a baby? It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because you know you have been trying, and so it becomes a point where you have to tell others, and you feel like, I'm going to fall apart even more if others know. And I can tell you, when I finally decided to open up, you found that your family some of your family may have gone through it. They might just not have told anybody, and so you can find that place where you can really talk to each other. Something else that might be really impactful in your marriage when you talk about infertility is the fact that it's my fault, it's your fault, and we never want to get to that place where you're blaming each other, because this process is hard enough, and if we have gotten to the point of blaming each other, that means we're not helping each other, we're not consoling each other. We're trying to play tit for tat, like, oh no, I've got it worse than you do, and you're going back and forth, and you're making it a little harder on your marriage. Infertility also can put a damper in your sex life. When the doctor is telling you, yes, on this day, this day, this day, and this day, you must have sex, and you lose the fun out of having sex. You lose the spontaneousness of it. You lose the just because I want to have sex feeling. it puts a strain. It can definitely put a strain on your sexual desires, because you can get to the point where you're only using me because you want to have that baby. So you only want to use me for my sperm, which is totally not true, especially when you want to still enjoy that sexual intimacy. Yes, you can enjoy intimacy other ways, but when you want to have that sexual intimacy, it becomes a little harder. And the biggest strain of it all is that financial strain. The financial strain, even without infertility, is a lot of the reason people get divorced. But when we're talking about infertility, and infertility costs money, people don't understand how much money it actually costs to actually go through infertility treatment, between the doctor visits and the procedures and the medication. It is something that is hard to go through. It is something that's hard to go through, but I got some tips for you that will really help you. Tip number 1, be each other's biggest cheerleader. And that's simple as, it's okay. It's as simple as, oh, I'll be here when you get out. It's as simple as, hey, let's go to dinner. It's the, I'm by your side through this, through the thick, the thin. I'm by your side, and you're not getting rid of me. That's plain and simple. You're not getting rid of me. I'm here. I'm here to stay. But we're going to go through this together, and we're going to figure it out. Another tip number 2, find a way to cope on your own as well. So that might be taking time to start journaling. It might take a time to, like what I'm doing, you start making the videos to help other people. It might mean taking me days, taking time to relax, taking time to reflect, and finding a place where you can love yourself again and start dealing with some of those emotions that will come with infertility. You want to also understand, so tip number 3 is you want to understand you guys are different. And the same way that you're going to cope with things, they're not going to cope the same way. So if they're asking you, okay, after we go through this, give me 5 minutes and I'll approach you, you have to take that. You have to give them the time and space they need to cope with the fact that we're different, we're going through this, but I can do it in my own way. You have to give each other the space to grieve through this process. And then when you get to the point of celebrating, you celebrate together. Next up, you want to not only talk, but to listen. People want to talk and they want to hear you. Hearing you and listening are 2 totally separate things. When you listen, you're listening to things that are happening. You're listening and you're paying attention to body language. You are listening to know when to respond. So when you're to respond, when you're hearing people, you're just hearing to make the comeback. But when you listen, you comprehend, you understand what they're saying. So when you stop just hearing people and truly start listening, you'll understand what they're saying to you. And when you're in a relationship, that is something that you really have to understand and you really have to be able to do, because if all you're doing is talking and you're not listening, you're not going anywhere. Next up, compromise. So compromise is the name of the game for any relationship. But when it comes to infertility, when I mean compromise is if we know that take for example my situation. We know that we will continue our next step in around the new year, because that's when our new insurance will kick in, and they will actually cover for our infertility. But the question is when. So the compromise is to take a time where both of you are able to do it. You both can be there for each other. You compromise on dates. You compromise on times. You compromise. That's the name of the game, is compromise. And the next part that goes with compromise is to make a plan. This step is the most important, because if you can make a plan together, you can do great things, okay? If you guys can sit down, make a plan, and that might include it actually going through, but with the realization that it might not. But the idea is to make a plan, have that goal, so that you can move forward. The next step is consider counseling. If you're really struggling and you guys are constantly bickering, you're constantly going at each other's throat, you're not being able to make that compromise, you're not able to be each other's biggest cheerleader, you might need somebody to help with that. So counseling, therapy might be a good idea. Everybody doesn't need it, but it's something that you want to keep in your back pocket just in case it is needed. And you want to make sure when you, just like when you pick your infertility clinic, you want to do the same thing for your therapist. Make sure that you can follow those same steps, but just twist them a little bit to make sure it's a good fit for you and your spouse. And the last tip is to understand that it can get better. There are options out there. It can get better, and you can make it through. You guys can make it through together to the other side, to holding that baby of yours. You can make it through. You just have to keep going, and you will get there. But until next time, keep it pushing and subscribe.